The most secret place in the United States can easily be found on a map, a small stretch of desert in the western part of the country known as Area 51. Over the years, this location has become something of a meme. Almost everyone has heard of it. Many have read about it, but very few actually know what goes on there. We might never have heard of Area 51 if it weren't for one man, Bob Lazar. In 1989, he gave an interview to a small television station. Lazar claimed that he was a former employee of the secret military base called Area 51. According to him, the US government was hiding alien flying saucers there and conducting top-secret experiments. He said he had seen all of this with his own eyes. Stories of grey aliens and flying saucers sound completely absurd until you start looking into the history of what is now called Area 51. Then Lazar's account turns out to be at least partially true. In this video, we'll dive into the full story of America's most secret location. Why did US officials avoid even mentioning Area 51 for almost 50 years? When and why was this mysterious site created? Why was some of its information withheld, even from the US president? And finally, what really happens there? This is the true story of Area 51. Let's start with a quote from Winston Churchill. A riddle wrapped in a mystery, inside an enigma. He once used it to describe Russia, but this phrase perfectly fits the subject of today's video, because this secret has many layers. The first layer is simply the existence of Area 51. Today, no one doubts it exists, but 15 to 20 years ago, things were very different. For many, Area 51 existed somewhere between Atlantis and El Dorado. This clip shows US President Barack Obama in 2013. It is noteworthy because it marks the first time an American president publicly said the words Area 51. And this was just a little over 10 years ago. Only in the past 10 to 15 years, thanks to declassified documents, journalistic investigations, interviews with former employees, and other sources, can we definitively say not only that Area 51 exists, but also answer the main question: what exactly have American authorities been hiding there for more than half a century? Early one morning, a CIA spy plane takes off from a secret base in Pakistan. At the controls is Gary Powers, an experienced US military pilot. This mission is the most challenging of his life. Powers' task is to reach the southern border of the USSR, cross the entire country to the north, and land in Norway. Along the way, he must photograph secret sites, including the Tyuratam and Plesetsk cosmodromes. Powers has at his disposal a massive camera capable of shooting in high resolution from 20 kilometers away. That distance is not random. This is the altitude at which the U-2 spy plane can fly, out of reach of enemy fighters. The U-2, a remarkable American aircraft, could often evade radar and could not be intercepted by the Soviet MiGs, which flew much lower. Soviet missiles had failed for years to shoot down a U-2 over their territory, even when it was detected. For Powers, this is not his first U-2 flight over the USSR, but for both pilot and plane, this mission is unprecedented. Never before had a reconnaissance plane crossed the entire Soviet Union from border to border. Powers will spend 13 hours in the cockpit. Meanwhile, in Moscow, early morning reports reach Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev. A high-altitude aircraft has crossed the Afghan border into the USSR. Since this is not the first U-2 mission, everyone knows whose plane it is and its purpose. The tension is heightened because it is May 1st. Khrushchev suspects that President Eisenhower is mocking him. He orders the plane to be shot down at all costs. About an hour and a half after takeoff, over Uzbekistan, Powers approaches his first target, the Tyuratam Cosmodrome, from where Yuri Gagarin will fly a year later. Below him, he sees the trail of a jet aircraft. The MiGs are in the air. But Powers is not worried. He continues at an altitude unreachable by the MiGs. Suddenly, explosions nearby shake the U-2, and it begins to lose altitude. Powers realizes he has been hit. Both wings break off, and the remaining fuselage, along with the pilot, plummets at high speed. Powers struggles to eject, but oxygen tubes are still attached, pulling him along with the falling plane. After extreme strain, he disconnects the tube and finally descends freely, deploying his parachute moments later. When the U-2 is struck by a Soviet missile, it disappears from CYA radar. The plane is assumed to have crashed on Soviet territory. For intelligence agencies, this is serious, but not catastrophic. Their calculations assume that if the missile destroys the U-2 and the pilot dies, the Soviets will gain no sensitive information from the wreckage or the unmarked pilot. Powers carries a lethal pill to avoid capture. In short, the CIA is confident that no secrets about the U-2, especially those related to Area 51, will fall into enemy hands. The story of Area 51 began with the bomb. The Manhattan Project, the US program to develop nuclear weapons, was the first truly secret operation involving 200,000 people across dozens of locations. Outside the project, no one knew about it. Harry Truman became president in 1945, and only then was he briefed on the Manhattan Project. Prior to that, despite holding high positions, including vice president, he had no access to the information. By Truman's orders, starting in the early 1950s, an existing military base in the Nevada desert was chosen for nuclear tests, a massive area of nearly 3,500 square kilometers. This test site became the only one of its kind in the US, and later, Area 51 would emerge there. After Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and numerous nuclear tests, many American military personnel believed that such bombs would not end wars, but could trigger apocalypse. They considered espionage a safer alternative. Knowing your enemy's plans allows you to counter them effectively. By the late 1940s, with the Cold War beginning, the Soviet Union became America's main strategic rival. Recruiting spies inside the USSR was nearly impossible, so reconnaissance aircraft became the logical solution. Existing spy planes were inadequate, as the Korean War demonstrated. Soviet MiG-15s easily shot down American reconnaissance planes. The U-2, developed by Lockheed, was designed to fly well above Soviet MiGs, remaining untouchable. The U-2 project was less interesting to the Air Force, as it could only conduct reconnaissance missions. For the CIA, however, espionage was core business. The secret project was led by Richard Bissell, a senior CIA officer, tasked by President Eisenhower to select a test site. The best choice was the dried-up Groom Lake in the Nevada desert, already equipped with a temporary runway. Mountains to the north and south provided natural cover. The nearby Nevada test site, used for nuclear testing, ensured security infrastructure. The Nevada test site was divided into numbered areas: Area 1, Area 2, Area 17, Area 25, etc., each for different tests, mainly nuclear. The new base on the edge of the site was designated Area 51, marking the beginning of America's most secret location in 1955. Nevada's desert is inhospitable. Summer heat can fry eggs on metal surfaces. Strong winds sway hangars. Special boots are required to avoid rattlesnakes. Few employees ever called it Area 51. Most referred to it as Groom Lake or the Ranch. From the start, secrecy was paramount. Work was divided among departments, each knowing only what was necessary. Only leaders saw the full picture. Every employee, from pilots to support staff, underwent background checks and signed non-disclosure agreements. Lockheed's factories were in neighboring California. Parts were made separately, then transported to Groom Lake for assembly, meaning only those working on site ever saw the full U-2. Most pilots and mechanics lived with their families in California, flown daily to work and back. Families had no idea what their relatives were actually doing. One engineer recalled his wife, and kids believed he repaired televisions. The secrecy was confirmed by a plane crash in 1955. One aircraft carrying Area 51 staff crashed in the Nevada mountains. Families only learned the truth in the early 2000s, when the documents were declassified. Even at the CIA, only a select few knew about the U-2 program. All these security measures around the project greatly contributed to the UFO stories and conspiracy theories about the government hiding the truth. In the late 1940s, the United States experienced a UFO craze, with numerous reports from people seeing unidentified flying objects and testimonies from both civilian and military pilots claiming to spot something in the sky moving faster or higher than any known aircraft. This wave of sightings coincided with a sharp leap in aviation technology. Ordinary citizens and even professional pilots were unaware of the secret developments in the military-industrial complex, such as new jet planes or missiles. So it was only natural that they interpreted these unknown objects as alien spacecraft. That doesn't mean every single UFO sighting was a military experiment, but a significant portion likely was. In the 1950s, similar incidents happened repeatedly with the U-2 spy plane. Its exterior was made of aluminum, and initially it wasn't painted dark. This made the silver U-2 reflect sunlight brilliantly, standing out against the dark sky. When civilian or military pilots spotted something shiny flying at altitudes previously thought impossible, they understandably couldn't believe their eyes. During the UFO craze, the Air Force and CIA created special departments to investigate these sightings. However, due to the secrecy surrounding projects like the U-2, these investigators didn't have access to the most classified programs. That meant many U-2 sightings were genuinely unexplained from their perspective. It's no surprise that some of these investigators later fueled the conspiracy theories, claiming the government was hiding the real truth about UFOs and aliens. The CIA also played a role in popularizing these conspiracy theories. In the early 1950s, they launched a media campaign to debunk UFO sightings. TV shows and newspaper articles explained that what people saw had rational explanations, ranging from natural phenomena to camera malfunctions. These efforts failed. Stories about mysterious aliens and unexplained objects attracted far more attention than the official explanations. Years later, it became public knowledge that the CIA both funded media campaigns to debunk UFOs while secretly maintaining a department investigating unexplained incidents. This reinforced the belief among UFO enthusiasts that the government was concealing the truth. By the mid-1950s, the CIA realized that rumors about flying saucers worked in their favor. Let the public talk about UFOs, they reasoned. rather than real top-secret military projects. This approach significantly shaped the public perception of Area 51. A key milestone for the U-2 came on July 3, 1956. Pilot Harvey Stockman flew the U-2 over the Soviet Union for the first time. Taking off from West Germany, he reached Leningrad, conducted reconnaissance, and returned safely. This mission was crucial for proving to President Eisenhower that the U-2 was worth the cost. The plane had been expensive to design and produce, funded by American taxpayers. Stockman's photos were high quality and captured everyday Soviet life, showing that the USSR wasn't just a giant military base preparing for war. However, there was a downside. Soviet forces detected the U-2. While MiGs and surface-to-air missiles couldn't stop it, the Soviets were aware of American spying. Eisenhower worried such acts could trigger nuclear war. Nikita Khrushchev chose not to publicize it, avoiding the appearance of weak Soviet defenses. U-2 flights over the USSR continued for years. Despite painting the planes dark to avoid radar, they were still tracked, intercepted, or fired upon unsuccessfully. Everything changed on May 1st, 1960, when Gary Powers' U-2 was shot down over Soviet territory. Powers' downing marked the beginning of the end for the legendary U-2. The CIA assured Eisenhower that the pilot had likely perished, and without identification, the official story claimed the plane was civilian, conducting NASA weather research. Khrushchev, however, publicly revealed that Powers was a spy. The US found itself caught in a political embarrassment. Their spying was exposed, yet the president had publicly lied about it. During interrogation, Powers cleverly misled the Soviets about his training flights, claiming they occurred at a different base, Uttertown, not Area 51. NASA followed the same story in their press release. The goal was to protect Area 51. In fact, the USSR had known about Area 51 for years. While they lagged behind the US in spy planes, they excelled in rocketry, nuclear weapons, and space technology. Soviet satellites had captured low-resolution images of the base, confirming its existence. By 1961, several events reshaped U-2 and Area 51 operations. Powers' shoot-down, the failed Bay of Pigs invasion, and the detonation of the Tsar bomber by the USSR. The nuclear arms race intensified, making it critical for the US to monitor Soviet military facilities. The need arose for a new, faster, higher-flying, and more radar-invisible spy plane. By the early 1960s, U-2 testing at Area 51 was winding down, replaced by the advanced Lockheed A-12, known as Project Oxcart. The titanium aircraft could fly 25 kilometers high, 3 times the speed of sound, and was virtually invisible to radar. Security at Area 51 reached a new level. The CIA monitored anyone discussing the base or the A-12, including journalists and civilians. Test pilots were required to be married, and even their wives had strict eligibility standards, though they had no idea what their husbands were actually doing. Kenneth Collins was one of the pilots testing the A-12 at Area 51 in the early 60s. During a flight, he experienced a critical control failure and had to eject. The CIA interrogated him using truth serum and hypnosis to confirm he hadn't caused the crash. The incident highlighted both the plane's cutting-edge technology and the extreme secrecy surrounding the project. With the A-12 testing, UFO sightings in the region skyrocketed. Commercial pilots reported objects flying far higher and faster than any known aircraft. In 1962, NASA's X-15 rocket plane tests captured an image that appeared to show a UFO, actually the A-12 in nearby airspace. Declassified CIA documents from 2007 confirm this. In 1966, the nation's leading news anchor, Walter Cronkite, aired a major report about mysterious objects in the sky. Ordinary witnesses and representatives from UFO investigation departments recounted incidents that defied explanation. A high-ranking Air Force official was invited to speak, but of course, he could reveal nothing about the U-2, the A-12, or Area 51. At the time, only select CIA and Air Force personnel had knowledge of these projects, and most information would not be declassified for another 50 years. The A-12, like its predecessors, was primarily a CIA project. The Air Force also played a role at Area 51, mainly handling technical tasks, transporting personnel to and from the base, supplying fuel, equipment, and other essentials. Over time, however, the Air Force and CIA became competitors for control over Area 51. The Air Force was developing its own stealth reconnaissance plane, the legendary SR-71, nicknamed the Blackbird. The SR-71 borrowed heavily from the A-12, and with both programs costing billions of dollars, it was clear only one could ultimately survive. To keep the A-12 program alive, the CIA needed a real-world mission, and the ongoing Vietnam War provided the perfect opportunity. The conflict between North and South Vietnam was a key chapter in the Cold War. The USSR supported and armed the North, while the US backed the South. Soviet advances in missile technology made American aircraft vulnerable. The US needed a plane capable of locating missile sites, and the A-12 fit the bill perfectly. While Area 51 is synonymous with the US, few know there was a secret site in Japan. In 1967, the CIA established a branch on Okinawa at Kadena Air Base to support her 12 operations over Vietnam. All the same security measures applied as at the original Nevada base. Among the pilots assigned, there was Harvey Stockman, who had flown the first U-2 mission over the USSR a decade earlier. The A-12 was a huge leap beyond its predecessor, capable of evading radar over 90% of the time. Using the A-12, the US could accurately track North Vietnamese missile positions, drastically reducing American aircraft losses. The plane even helped prevent further escalation, as in the Pueblo incident of January 1968. The American ship Pueblo, officially conducting research near North Korea, was actually a spy vessel with CIA personnel and classified equipment on board. When the North Koreans attacked, despite the ship being in international waters, President Lyndon Johnson considered a military strike. CIA Director Richard Helms proposed an alternative, 12 reconnaissance flights. Pilots secretly surveyed North Korean territory, confirming the crew's location and that no war preparations were underway. 11 months later, the captured Americans were released. By the late 1960s, the SR-71 Blackbird was operational. While the A-12 had performed admirably, this led to the closure of the Japanese branch and the end of the A-12 program. On the last day, pilots photographed themselves with their aircraft, but the images remained hidden in CIA archives for 50 years. Some A-12 pilots later transitioned to SR-71s, astonishing colleagues with their unmatched skills, though secrecy prevented them from sharing their previous 6 years flying the A-12. One of the most persistent Area 51 conspiracy theories involves alien spacecraft. supposedly recovered and studied at the base through reverse engineering, the process of taking apart an advanced object to understand its function and replicate it. Bob Lazar claimed this was his work at Area 51, and in a way, he was correct. However, the alien craft were actually foreign aircraft and technology, not extraterrestrial, still secretive, just less sensational. Have you ever heard of Area 52? Most people haven't. This secret Nevada base was modeled after Area 51, larger and more expansive, but it received little public attention. No alien theories, no green or grey men, no films or books. Area 52, officially called Tonopah Test Range, is about 70 kilometers from Area 51. Both bases are connected through one ambitious stealth aircraft project, the F-117, or Nighthawk. In the mid-1970s, the US Air Force decided to merge the best features of previous projects from Area 51, speed, altitude, radar invisibility, and add the ability to carry weapons for ground attacks. The F-117's first test flights took place over Groom Lake, but the base proved too small for the new aircraft. The Air Force turned to the Tonopah Test Range, originally built in the late 1950s for bomb testing, but largely abandoned. The site was revitalized for F-117 testing, and the aircraft successfully completed numerous trials at Area 52. Over the next 20 years, the F-117 would participate in many US military operations around the world. Here in our narrative, we reach a crucial point that requires some clarification. In the late 2000s and early 2010s, many documents regarding Area 51 and the projects conducted there were declassified. The US government officially acknowledged the existence of the famous Nevada secret base, which later allowed high-ranking officials, including the president, to publicly say the words Area 51. The problem is that most declassified documents cover the 1950s, 1960s, and partially the 1970s. Almost everything that happened at Area 51 from the 1980s onward remains top secret. But that doesn't mean we can't explore the subject, or imagine, if you will. Even before the U-2 and A-12 documents were declassified, journalists had pieced together a fairly accurate history of the programs by interviewing dozens of senior Area 51 personnel, gathering leaked documents, and noting slips from CIA and Air Force officials in interviews. Later, declassified documents confirmed much of what had already been reported about the 1950s to 60s. Thus, we can reasonably reconstruct what has been happening at Groom Lake over the last 4 decades. The key word here is drones. Nikola Tesla was one of the first to recognize their military potential, even trying to sell the concept to several countries, though without success. The Americans experimented with drone-like technology during World War II, radio-controlled bombs launched from aircraft. While the technology was unreliable, some military minds already saw its future. General Henry Arnold predicted that the next major war would be fought with drones. He was off by several wars and decades, but essentially correct. The CIA began working on reconnaissance drones at Area 51 in the early 1960s, modifying the A-12 into the M-21, which carried a drone called the D-21. The plan was for the aircraft to carry the drone to the target area, launch it, and let it complete its photographic mission before returning to the ocean to be recovered by US forces. Tests took place at Area 51. The first mission over China failed. The D-21 flew into Soviet airspace and crashed. For decades, drones took a back seat to manned aircraft due to cost and limited effectiveness. The situation changed in the 1990s. The CIA and Air Force recognized the reconnaissance and combat potential of drones such as the MQ-1 Predator and MQ-9 Reaper. Both were tested, including at Area 51, and played crucial roles in military operations over the past 20 years, including the elimination of terrorist leaders such as Osama bin Laden. As for the past 10 to 15 years, everything about current activities at Area 51 is pure speculation. No one knows what weapons or technologies are being developed there. Likely we won't know for another 50 years. And this applies not just to civilians, but even to US presidents. Many Area 51 projects were so secret that the president knew about them, while the vice president did not. A striking example occurred in 1994, when President Bill Clinton ordered an investigation into some controversial nuclear tests at the Nevada test site. Portions of the Commission's findings related to Area 51 were removed, as even the President lacked the necessary clearance. Area 51 remains a super-secret location, a small part of the Nellis Air Force Base complex, a vast desert area where countless weapons and technologies are developed and tested under strict secrecy. Most of the base is a no-fly zone, and access to restricted areas is heavily guarded. This environment naturally breeds conspiracy theories, most of which center on Area 51. And now it's time to return to that famous 1989 interview with Bob Lazar, which helped make the base famous. Lazar claimed that in the early 1980s, he worked at a nuclear lab in Los Alamos, where he met Edward Teller. 8 years later, Teller allegedly helped him get a position at a secret Area 51 lab called S4. Lazar said that this lab contained 9 alien spacecraft, which he was tasked with reverse engineering, and that he saw drawings of alien beings who supposedly piloted them. He even claimed to have glimpsed living grey aliens with large heads in a secured chamber. Because he saw more than he was supposed to, Lazar said he was dismissed. He chose to go public with his story in a Las Vegas TV interview. Later, inconsistencies in Lazar's biography emerged. He had a criminal record, and MIT stated he never attended, despite his claims. He sold the rights to his story to a Hollywood studio, disappeared for years, and then resurfaced with the same account. Lazar remains a highly controversial figure. He embodies one of the most enduring Area 51 conspiracy theories, that the government is hiding aliens and spacecraft. So, is Lazar telling the truth? Arguments in his defense point to his remarkable consistency over 30-plus years. He has not contradicted himself. Supporters claim the CIA fabricated negative details to discredit him. Theoretically, this is possible. But on the other side of the scale, Lazar is the sole source of his story. No one else confirms the aliens, 9 flying saucers, or the S4 lab. Annie Jacobson, author of A Detailed History of Groom Lake, interviewed 70 people involved in Area 51 projects, half of them former personnel, and none had ever met Lazar. Even within UFO research circles, many consider him a fraud. Stanton Friedman, author of a book on the Roswell incident, shared this view. To conclude, there is currently no reliable evidence, corroborated by multiple independent sources, that alien craft or extraterrestrials have ever been at Area 51. Beyond aliens, 2 other popular conspiracies exist: that the moon landing was faked at Area 51, and that tunnels under the site span the country for government use in a nuclear war. Both are nonsense, though rooted in real facts. Astronauts trained on craters near Area 51, resembling the lunar surface, and tunnels exist under other parts of the Nevada test site, but none lead to Washington. The perfect closing story. In August 1783 in France, the Montgolfier brothers tested one of their first hot air balloons. A lightning strike ignited it, and it fell toward a village. Villagers, seeing a large burning object descending from the sky, believed it to be a monster. Some fled, others attacked it with pitchforks and scythes. This story illustrates human reactions when knowledge lags behind technology. And in the end, this is the essence of the Area 51 myth.